What I'm not sure about is if our lives have been so different from the lives of the people we save. I read the book when it came out, and I thought if they ever make a film of that, I kind of have to play Kathy, but she was 31 in the book, and so I thought it would have to be sort of 10 years until they made the film for me to be able to do it. And then when this script came out and it was Kathy age 26, it sort of all fell into place, so it was lucky.
It is one of those rare stories that is unique and in line with what humanity should be, and with how we should live.
We are modelled on trash. Now, if you want to look for possibles, if you want to do it properly, and look in the gutter.
It's a fascinating concept. These three characters are the personification of particular human emotions, and yet you call them creatures. I think that's an extraordinary concept. The concept of the whole thing is fascinating.
I had a complex reaction to the book. It slowly draws you in, and I was drawn in by the strange mystery of Hailsham and this little girl's attitude towards her world, and then you get completely wrapped up in the book, and then it starts revealing things that are more and more profound and more disturbing and more beautiful, and was frankly kind of scared of the idea of making it into a film because I thought it was so delicate and so strange and so complex in a way that the degree of difficulty of making it into a film would be very high. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about the challenge of it and the puzzle of, if one were to make this into a film, how could you pull that off?
3-4 years ago, Alex Garland brought me an early copy of the book, not bound, just loosely photocopied, that his friend, the author Kazuo Ishiguro, had given to him. And he said to me, why don't we try and make this? I read the book, thought it was incredibly moving, and thought, if Alex wants to do this, let's try and do it.
We have a long relationship, DNA, with Alex Garland, and Andrew McDonald, who are part of DNA, has a longer relationship with him from the beach, and he's a key collaborator. When one of your key collaborators says, I've got a real notion of what to do, that's sort of the most eloquent reason to get involved in something.
I read it in bound galley, like a proof, just before it was published, because I knew the publisher, and the publisher knew I was a fan of Ishiguro's stuff, and he sent me a copy. Just out of friendliness, really, and I read it and immediately thought it was terrific, and just started thinking about it very quickly while I was reading it. Really, I was thinking about it as a film, and when it was finished, I contacted the author and asked him if he would be interested in the idea of adapting it into a film. And he said he was, and I think it just started from there.
Alex Garland is a friend of mine. We've been friends for about over a decade. And it's because, I read his novel, The Beach, which came out in the 90s, which he published as a very young man. And I discovered that he lived very, very near where I did. And so we started to meet for coffees and lunches. And even before the novel was published, he had read it and expressed interest in turning it into a movie, and so we discussed it, and that's what I wanted to happen. When the book came out, actually, we had a lot of interest from America, from all kinds of filmmakers. But by then, I was set on doing it with Alex and with DNA. We didn't have a director in place at that point, but I felt the most important first step was to get the screenplay right.
I didn't see my job as providing ideas. I saw my job as the ideas were provided in the novel, and I just had to find a way of making them cinematic. When I say I had to find a way, I was part of a team of people who were trying to find a way of making them cinematic, obviously, but it was a very different process for me from writing a spec script where you're coming up with the idea. I never felt like I owned the story or I owned the characters. They were Ishiguro's characters and Ishiguro's themes and Ishiguro's story, and I was always very secondary to that in the way I approached it, for sure.
The thing that I'm always looking for in trying to find a film to make, because it's such a big commitment of your life, and it's a minimum of 18 months of your life, the first thing I look for is this moving me? Am I moved by this? But then I go, have I seen it before? And what I thought was so exciting about Never Let Me Go was that there's not a single scene in the film that I've seen before. I've seen British boarding school films and that type of thing, but the facts of the story render every scene, no matter how simple, really strange and compelling and filled with tension and filled with pathos.
It's a genuinely sad story, and Andrew and I are very keen that it wasn't a kind of bleak, dour British story. We thought actually you had to bring something a little bit different visually, and we thought for a while, maybe it should be not necessarily an English director, just because you bring a different eye, and that's, I guess, people always look to say Ang Lee in Sense and Sensibility as a sort of classic example of that. And Mark approached us and said, I really want to do this, and he obviously has a big connection with the material. He flew over, we had a meeting, we got on very well. He then flew back and we spent 10 days really going through the script. And he shared a love of the book. He'd read it twice off the bat as a punter, as it were, when it first came out in America, just because it had stuck so much in his head. And I think he brings that kind of meticulous visual style.
This is only his second full-length feature film, but I was really struck by 1 Hour Photo, the Robin Williams film that he made a few years ago. He's able to take very ordinary, what might be ordinary images on the surface, and they're full of eeriness or potential. You think that there is something beneath the surface here, something's going to bubble up and happen. That same kind of repressed energy that I sometimes try to go for in my own writing.
Mark he's like a conceptual artist, I think. He's a visual artist, and I think what the producers wanted was that this film should look extraordinary.
Mark is making it very aesthetically beautiful and being very, very sensitive with us on set. And I've seen some small stills, and it just looks beautiful. It just looks very honest and very rich.
The book worked like a good dream, where a good dream is trying to tell you something. It's trying to tell you something that's true, to help you, but it kind of couches it in symbols and metaphors and I think that this story does that. It's telling us something true, which is that our life is a limited length, and that you don't want to come to the end of it and have major regrets. That you want to live it, and you want to embrace the opportunities to love people in the moment. And that's an important thing to make a film about, or a good thing to make a film about. But if you hit people too directly with that, it's a little bit, it could be just too bleak or too sad. I think what Ishiguro does is he writes it so beautifully that it's an aesthetically pleasing experience to be told this story. And so I wanted to make an unashamedly beautiful film. I wanted it to be unironic and sincere and just beautiful.
I now spend most of my time not looking forwards, but looking back to the cottages and Hailsham and what happened to us there.
I was quite amazed how much of the novel actually seems to be in there. But for me, watching the film, and if you're asking, what was the thing I took away from it that seemed a dimension that was different from the novel, it was to do with the acting. I was really quite kind of blown back by their performances. And what really struck me was that there is something actually different about the way the younger generation of British actors perform. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but they are different to the Olivier generation, or even the great generation of people like Judi Dench and Maggie Smith and so on. They perform in a slightly different way, and it is something unique to their generation. And I think in this film, because you see so many of them all together, not acting just off their elder people, but acting together, that you really see something of this, what I would call a kind of a new British style of acting.
We met the most gifted young actors in England, every one of them. And the process was really, do they have a deep affinity for these characters? Do they have a deep understanding for the characters? Do they have a love for the book and what it was about? So when we found Carrie and Andrew and Kira, and that triangle of talented young people came together, and they were the ones that were going to embody these characters and tell this story, it was so clear to me that they were so serious and intent and sensitive that it was going to be my job to just simply create an environment for them to do this task and stay out of their way if I could. And so it was a very intense and quiet set where these very brilliant young people were allowed to, I hope, just shine.
If there was a boy and a girl, and they were in love with each other, really properly in love, and they could prove it, then they would be given a few years together before they began their donations. Who is it you go to? Who would we talk to if we wanted to apply?
To be honest, I don't know what you're talking about.
I think we feel really lucky that we're making a film about, I mean, for actors, it's an amazing thing, but to be able to tell a story about, like, the human soul is so, is so rich and enormous, and there are so many things we could have done, and we've been kind of careful in the choices we've made in the love story between Tommy and Kathy, and the friendship between Ruth and Kathy. But it's to tell a story about that, about the... we were shooting the deferral scene when we were in Madame's house, and there's a line in the book that was just running through my head the whole time when they say there are no deferrals, and we were looking at your work to determine if you had souls at all. Kathy just says, did someone think we didn't have souls? And so many of the things in the book just stick in my head and go round and round and round, and they're so helpful when we're filming. But to be able to make a film about this is really exciting.
You're only as good as the other actors you're working with, and when you have actors like this, it is a joy. It feels like going to a playground every day, and just kind of mucking around without any self-consciousness. It's like being a kid again, and that feeling is so precious. And who would have thought it? Who would have thought that I'd be allowed to be a part of it? And I feel very lucky.
One of the main reasons that I took this part was because I was told that Carrie was going to play Kathy. We worked together 5 years ago on Pride and Prejudice, and I thought she was one of the most exciting actors I'd seen then, and that was her first job. We've been friends since then. I think she's brilliant, regardless of her being a mate of mine. She is an absolutely phenomenal actress. She really is. And I love working with her. I loved working with her 5 years ago, and we've had an amazing time on this. She's incredibly supportive. We sat in a cafe for about 3 hours and just went through everything. And to be able to kind of, I think it's always great when you go into these situations, these working environments, and you actually know the person and get on with them and know how they work. And we work really, really well together.
The three of them approach their craft differently and have very different personalities. And they really it was like a three-way dovetailing of different styles that complemented each other and made that triangle of characters kind of like a circuit, because they're all so different. And yet different, and not in a way that clashed with each other. They sort of complemented each other. I think Andrew's very intuitive and very surprised. He works in a very immediate, in the moment, surprising, sometimes very eccentric way. Kira, I think, comes more from the head. I think she thinks. She's an intellectual actress, and I think she thinks very much about what she's doing and why she's doing it. And Carrie is this, incredible, like an alchemist, like a minimalist, where I think what's going on is very, very real. It's not, in a way, it isn't acting. It's truly, she's really being what the character needs to be in each moment. She's really feeling these things, which I think is very taxing and very exhausting and very demanding and very hard to do.
It's not dramatic, really, and we're not there's not lots of tears and lots of shouting and screaming. It's all everything's very kind of hidden, and no one really says what they mean. But the amount of energy that people take to not say what they mean and to hold down everything they feel all the time is sort of exhausting, but it is a wonderful thing to make a film about.
The entire first act of the movie is made up of the story of these characters when they're children. In most films, you have 3 or 4, maybe 5 scenes, and then you hand it off to the adult actors that are the stars of the film. Whereas in this film, it's the entire first act is them as 12-year-old children. That's strange, and was a little scary whether we could pull that off. And the only way to pull it off was to make sure we found really extraordinary kids.
Izzy is really quite a remarkable young actress. I mean, they're all terrific. Izzy has a particularly hard job, I think, because the character of Kathy can feel very passive, but actually she's very strong. And for an older and more experienced actress like Carey Mulligan, she can take on some of those complexities and think them through or intellectualize them or whatever. And Izzy, what she did, given that tricky character, is very impressive.
They look freakishly like us, and they're all really, really brilliant. I like spending time with them, and I feel really protective over Izzy, who's playing Kathy.
It's all quite toned down and behind the eyes, and me and Kerry were talking about it earlier, and we were both saying how weird it is that we both managed to do it so similarly.
Who told you these stories?
Everybody knows them.
And how do you know they're true?
Of course they. Who'd make up stories as horrible as that?
One thing that was important to me was that these young actors not only be great actors, which, as I said, they had to carry the whole first half hour of the film, but I did want them to really resemble the older actors, because in a lot of films you see that, and the handoff isn't really that plausible. So I did kind of demand that they really resembled, Carey and Kira and Andrew. So it made it doubly, difficult to find the right kids for these roles. But I think we did.
It's pretty. You haven't.
It's a big ask, but I think they're all great. I mean, we rehearsed little bits with them. We sort of read through everything, so they saw us play their scenes, so that we had some sort of continuity between, the people that are playing the characters.
I think at the very beginning, when we were doing all the script read-throughs, that we kind of cleared what she would be more like. So Kira was helping me, saying, you could say this line like this, because Ruth would be thinking this at the time.
Another cool thing we did in rehearsals is we had the older actors read the scenes from the first act that they would never actually be filming. But it had served the double purpose of giving a sense memory to them of having played those scenes for when they did the later scenes. And it allowed the young actors to observe how the older actors would play it, so that there would start to be a bit of a, hopefully just a bit of a blur in the short period of time they could spend together of their way of behaving.
I'm losing my voice slightly because I was screaming yesterday. I had one of my temper tantrums, and yeah, that is hard.
The scream is pure. It was horrible to do. It was really horrible to do. Because it had to come from somewhere. Otherwise, it would have meant nothing. And I think Charlie, who's playing the younger Tommy, we talked about it before already, and I actually stole from him in the first rehearsal we did, and he was extremely physical and extremely free, and it was very upsetting to watch. So we've been kind of working together on it. But it's a wonderful kind of like bookend to Tommy's journey. The fact that he ends up in the same place where he kind of begins is kind of ironic.
What he gave that night on that road, what he gave in a way to audiences, so that the story would be a real thing to see and not just a movie, is amazing.
It was how I imagined it in my head, but 18 times worse. It was like hearing a car crash. It was a really kind of harrowing sound that he made, and how they shot it was perfect.
I think I've died by Tommy's scream. I've already had my liver taken out by that point, so I didn't see it. I was liverless.
Good morning, Miss Emily. All rise.
The color scheme of the film was very, very controlled. There's not a surface of the movie, a wall that's not been painted a different color from its original, to just modulate the tone, this sort of pastel tone. It seemed like Ishiguro's restraint would be best translated in a really subtle palette, and the palette of the film is extremely controlled.
Thank you, Mr. Gaffers. It is exactly how I saw it when I read the book. Going into the cottages it was so beautiful, but it wasn't like, it looked like these were people who were making the very best of nothing, and they didn't have any money or any material objects, and they were making the best of it.
The concept of the whole thing, and I thought it was a brilliant concept, as opposed to sort of making it into like a science fiction thing, which you'd kind of expect if you're talking about cloning people, harvesting people. It hasn't actually happened yet, so set it somewhere in a very clinical future. You know, I think that's how, when I first read it, I sort of thought, oh, I can see that would be a way to go with it. What I thought was fascinating was saying, no, it's parallel. You know, it's saying that we did start cloning people in the 50s, and now we come to the 70s, and there's been a couple of generations or something like that, and here we are, you know, and it's become this accepted thing. So I thought it was brilliant to set it in that time period, so that there's something retro, if you like, about it. Makes it even stranger, I think, that you're saying that this is happening right now, or this is happening 20 years ago, or this is happening today, is a very strange concept. And then again, you know, you look at the clothing, the look of it. It is, I mean, we did go for it's the orphanage type vibe, you know, it's a group of people that don't have any money, so it's not like they're going out and they're buying fancy things, you know, it's clothing bins that charities have donated.
And because it's about the passage of time and the preciousness of time and the urgent, desperate plea for more time, I thought it was right to make the film have nothing new in it. There's nothing new in the film. Everything is old and faded and hand-me-down and worn, and you know, the first part of the film takes place in the 70s, but, you know, if you're in the 70s, not everything is brand new.
Tommy, what are you doing? What is it exactly? I think it must be a dog. Is it a dog, Tommy?
It can't be a dog. Its eyes are too small. I think it must be a kind of rat.
Yes, that's it. Tommy's drawn a rat.
It's not finished yet. That's right. You haven't finished the whiskers.
Do you think Tommy's rat will be selected for the gallery?
It's not a rat. It's an elephant.
Tommy was supposed to have been making art over the course of like 10 years, and we had to create a quality of art that came from this very different, institutionalized young boy. Grew up parentless and is a human clone, and came from an institution of Hailsham and has limited knowledge of the outside world, and certainly wasn't formally taught art. So we had to create these art objects that suggested a process of him, this self-taught process that would be expressive of all of his emotions. And so the trick of getting that art to be just the right thing, just the right style, and just the right quality was, you know, a little scary. It's another thing that's, you know, you read in a book and everyone can imagine how they like, but we had to make it concrete. And our brilliant art director, Michelle Day, found an artist named Charlie Cobb. And Charlie just generated masses of beautiful, beautiful art. There's entire booklets where every page is filled. I mean, if you're watching this for a DVD, I'm sure that it'll be on the DVD, and you can really appreciate it, because he really generated this mass of beautiful work that just captured that quality of naivete and a disturbed mind, and the urgency with which it needed to be, and the obsessiveness with which it needed to be created.
The problem is, you've been told and not told. That's what I've seen while I've been here. You've been told, but none of you really understand. So I've decided I'll talk to you in a way that you will understand.
People say, is this really profound? Is it a metaphor? Is it an allegory? And if it's a metaphor, what is it a metaphor for? People also ask things like, Mr. Ishiguro, what on earth made you want to write about clones? Did you write this book because you have a big fear that science is actually, you know, running out of control, it's turning into a Frankenstein's monster and it's going to destroy the planet and humanity? Some people ask, do you think we already have a society like the one you describe in Never Let Me Go, where some kind of group of people are exploited for the well-being of the majority? What else do they ask? Why don't these people run away? Where's their spirit of rebellion? Why do they comply? Even worse than comply, why do they seem to take pride in the sacrifices they have to make? To be fair, a lot of those questions are very important questions. In one way or the other, I think they do. In one way or the other, they all go to the heart of what I was trying to do, I think. For instance, the question, why a clone? Why write about clones? Why use clones in fiction? Well, that perhaps that's coming from some place that says, are you into sci-fi? Are you into the Terminator? But but underneath such a question, well, I usually do reply that actually one of the real advantages of using clones or robots or supercomputers like HAL in 2001 in fiction is that it immediately raises the question, what does it mean to be human? If these things are so close to being human, are they human? And you get back to some of these old questions that you find in literature throughout the history of literature. What is a soul? What does it mean to have a soul?
It's a story about life, about everybody's life. We all die. We can't quite comprehend what that means. None of us can. Me sitting here right now at 24 knows that I'm going to die. I don't comprehend what that is. You can't run away from it. And I think even though you put these characters in this strange situation, it is actually just looking at life, concertinaed down to 26 years or however old they are when they actually die. But there is no sense that they go, oh, I don't want this to happen, I'm gonna fight it, I'm gonna run away. They're this kind of weird institutionalized thing where they don't actually run.
Somewhere in my mind there was something that I'd heard a doctor say once, which was that when patients are diagnosed with cancer, and I'm sure there will be exceptions to this, but he was saying this as a general rule. He said typically they don't go off around the world going to see the pyramids or bungee jumping in the Amazon or whatever wild and crazy experiences they'd want to pack into their remaining 2 years or whatever they have left. They want the life that they had to continue for as long as possible, so they'll carry on watching EastEnders and eating beans on toast and doing the opposite of bungee jumping. And that, when that guy said that, I thought, yeah, I bet that's true. And there's something in that, in these characters. They accept their fate.
It's one of the questions that at some level, at a kind of a plot level, people want a clear answer for. What because physically there seems to be nothing to stop them escaping. People imagine, well, maybe there is some sort of secret police or something that you don't quite see that's holding them in place or coercing them. But the real point is, and I think most people who ask this question have picked up on this, the real point about it is that these people don't seem to want to escape. It doesn't occur to them. It's beyond their horizons. So if I had to give a straight, very simple, succinct, honest answer to why don't they run away in this particular book, I suppose the answer would have to be, look, it's because essentially I structured the whole thing as a metaphor for how we face mortality and the fact that we are, by our very natures, we just get older and then we start to lose control over bits of ourselves and then we die. We can't get away from that. We can work within that framework and we can try and make the best of what we have, knowing that. But we can't get away from that. We can't run away from that. And that's why these people don't try and run away from their fate. There is nowhere to run away to.
We all complete. Maybe none of us really understand what we've lived through, or feel we've had enough time.